What I could do is just ground everybody in the presentation. We have a statewide focus, our coalition, and Alejandra and Jessica are going to bring a county perspective about the work that they're doing in Riverside that still pertains to our statewide initiative. But I do have some slides. I'm going to share screen and then I'll pass to you, Alejandra, in just a few. If that's okay with folks.
Perfect.
Okay. Ooh. Okay. So thank you all for joining the call. Today we're going to be talking about the PROMYSE Act, Promoting Youth Success and Empowerment. This is pertaining to a significant state grant called the Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act. Has everyone heard of that? Can you do the Zoom raise your hand function if you have heard of JJCPA? Okay, we see some folks. Okay. So I'm not seeing a lot of hands. I see some thumbs up. JJCPA is a state grant that holds the potential to make a positive impact and investment in young people. I know everyone on this call today is invested in youth. And what we see at the county level is that there's not a lot of real dollar investment in young people. So JJCPA is a grant that is specific to prevention and intervention services. Unfortunately, what we've seen is that this grant has fallen short of its intent. So I represent a team of 12 organizations from across the state that are invested in reforming JJCPA to make sure that these dollars go to meeting the needs of young people. And here's a bit of an overview. So it was enacted in 2000, again, to limit the involvement of youth within the juvenile justice system. JJCPA provides stable state funding that is given to counties through non-competitive grants. That's really important because this fund is not related to, it's not, the amount that a county receives is not related to their arrest rates amongst youth. It's only related to county population. So it's not tied to youth arrest at all. 2021 to 2022, counties spent about $177 million of JJCPA funding. Unfortunately, a state audit showed that this funding was falling short from its original intent. And so a few of us have witnessed this happening within our counties, and we came together to try to find a statewide solution through policy and legislation. And one of those counties is Riverside. I did put together a slide here of kind of what was going on in Riverside, but Alejandra, Jessica, feel free to not use it and kind of just speak off the cuff, but I'll pass it to you too.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for having us. I know it's your first meeting. You don't meet very often, so just thank you for your time. I actually lived in Orange County for several years, so I have a very sweet spot for it in my heart. So glad to be here. So I actually am just going to give a quick overview of some of the issues that folks identified when it comes to Riverside County's JJCPA budget, and then Jessica will talk about the community's response to that. So basically, about 2 years ago, we started having conversations with leaders and CBOs on the ground about the juvenile justice landscape generally. And one of the things that everyone brought up was the fact that community-based organizations were not receiving sufficient resources and funds to sustain the work that they do with young people. So we started to provide support to the community organizations to start looking at the JJCPA budget. So what we did is looked at the JJCPA reports that the county probation department submitted to the state, to the BSCC specifically, which provides the budget line items and also provides information about what programs are funded by JJCPA. Riverside Probation, as you can see here, also partnered with West Ed, and they released annual reports about JJCPA as well. So we looked into all of that information. And we ended up pretty much just analyzing the budget and analyzing what programs were being funded, and most importantly, what the outcomes of those programs were. So in 2021, 2022, when we started working on this, the total JJCPA budget in Riverside County was just a little bit over $6 million. And what we found is that 18% of that big budget was given to community-based organizations, while 82% was being given to system partners. So probation, district attorney, public defenders, and even the sheriff's department. So 18% of the 6 million that was given to CBOs was actually split up amongst 15 community-based organizations. So that means that every CBO only received about $100,000 a year. The probation department at the time received about 2.5 million. The DA's department received over 2 million as well. So, as you can see, you have community-based organizations working with young people out in the community, establishing community alternatives to system involvement, yet they're only receiving $100,000 each, while you have the system partners who are receiving millions. We also looked into the data collection mechanisms and found that the CBOs were reporting a lot of amazing outcomes. They partnered with West Ed and had a data evaluation tool where they were able to report how many young people they served, what the outcomes were, how young people were doing in different aspects of their lives. And we found that the system partners were not reporting at the same level as the CBOs. So we were left with a lot of questions about, how is this money being used and what are the actual outcomes in young people's lives? So those are the main issues that folks identified, is just the inequitable funding, the lack of consistent data collection mechanisms. And then we also figured that, or found through one of the reports, that a lot of the, actually like 90-something% of the budget was being invested in a specific part of the county, like Riverside, Moreno Valley, Corona, yet the Coachella Valley, which is actually my hometown, I grew up in Coachella, it's a very small rural region of the county that has a lot of great need, yet majority of the towns in that region were receiving 0% of the budget. So we also found that the money was not being distributed equally across the county based on need. So Jessica is going to talk about the community's response to it. If anybody is interested in looking into this information, we're happy to help. We're happy to share any materials that we created. And I'll just say that, thankfully, Riverside Probation Department has been very open. They've been transparent, and they've been in conversation with us and community about this, which is great. I think it's great to see that system partners are willing to lean in. It doesn't happen everywhere, but we've experienced that in Riverside. So it's really helping us move the ball forward to making sure that we're increasing investments in community-based approaches. So that's it for me. I'll pass it over to Jessica.
Yeah, thank you, Alejandra. Hi, everyone. Like I mentioned, my name is Jessica, and I'm with CAYCJ, but previous to this position, I was working for a nonprofit organization in Riverside County. And like Alejandra mentioned, we are thankful that now at this point, probation has heard us out and has been very cooperative in what these issues we've raised was, but it wasn't always like that. It took us a couple years of engaging in the JJC space and engaging with probation partners as well as other system partners to have our voices heard and really raise these issues from that point. So when it comes to the community involvement, we really began just from attending these JJCC meetings, and some of the CBO partners who were actually seated on the JJCC began to have conversations about what these issues are, along with other community partners that were on the JJC specifically, but have been attending these meetings and have seen kind of these issues that have arisen over time. And from that, we began to really dig into, like Alejandra shared, all of this data to be able to really bring up to fact what the issues were to the JJCC. And one of the ways we did that was actually to provide a letter that was put on the agenda for the JJCC that outlined a community-based approach for youth justice services and outlined some recommendations that we came up with that the JJCC could work towards. And at this point, from all of that work we've done through advocacy efforts in the JJCC, we've also been able to develop JJCC subcommittees, just like this space here. And I can actually share that if I can share my screen, Nancy, I can share some of these recommendations that we provided. Do I have access here? Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
So we had 4 main recommendations. We had one to increase JJCPA funding of CBO programs because of the issues that we found that organizations who did have contracts with probation were receiving at max $100,000 for providing these services. So we're trying to increase that. And also, like Alejandra mentioned, we had a very low percentage of CBOs in general receiving JJCPA funding. So we asked for an amount of at least 50% for CBO-led programs. Our second recommendation was to create consistent, equitable data tracking system. So this was really to support CBOs and their capacity to provide data, as well as support other system agencies to provide that same data that really shows the outcomes for our youth. Our third recommendation was to establish these work groups and have them also be accessible to community, whether that be folks that live outside of the main Riverside area, because Riverside County is a really huge area and some folks are in the Coachella Valley and 2 hours away. So how can we make it more accessible to them and have them have access to attending and being part and really using their voice in these spaces? And the fourth was really just to establish a strategic framework with priority areas of funding for youth, family, wellness, prevention, early intervention, integrated and coordinated system approach, family support and community capacity building, and pro-social and skill building opportunities. So at this point right now, we've actually worked with the JJCC to create a new subcommittee that's going to actually be taking some of these recommendations and starting to implement them, and also including CBO and community member voices in this space. And let me stop sharing my screen so I can see y'all. And that's where we're at with organizing and advocacy work in Riverside County. And I will pass it off to Nancy because we'll be connecting it to the statewide efforts.
Yes, do folks have any questions before I keep it rolling? Okay, no problem. So I'm gonna go ahead and share. Oh, did I hear a voice? Did you have a question, Elaine? Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share screen again. So what we found throughout the state is that Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act dollars has not kept up with historic drops in youth arrests. So this is true in every single county in California, whether you're in a small rural county, a large urban county like Los Angeles, a large rural county like Fresno, regardless of where you are in the state, arrests for all offenses have dropped significantly. So in Fresno, we see a 95% decline, Siskiyou, 90% decline, Los Angeles, 97% decline. And this is all coming from the Department of Justice resources. Again, all arrests across the state have dropped by 83% leading up to 2020. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is that Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act dollars don't match that. So we see a lot of this funding going to salaries and benefits of probation and this money isn't going towards Office of Education support or community-based organizations or any services that a lot of y'all provide. I heard somebody say housing for young people, for houseless young people. I heard at the opening, access to job training, job readiness, vocational training. So we're not seeing that investment, but what we understand is that young people are no longer in the system, right? They're in the community. There's been historic drops in youth arrests. Youth are in the community, but the investment is not following. So we're using JJCPA as just one avenue of reinvestment. We believe there should be reinvestment, within so many sectors, right? We want to see Office of Education budget increase. We want to see arts increase, parks and recreation, access to green spaces for young people increase. And JJCPA is just like one advocacy, that one way that we can move those dollars to meet community needs. The state recently closed DJJ, right? So we know that there are young people coming back to the county level. And again, we want that investment to match. Here's one other example, JJCPA from 2013 to 2021. It's in the light blue, and you can see that as youth arrests has declined, as youth referrals to probation has declined all the way down here, the investment towards probation salaries and benefits continues to increase. So again, there's this investment that's not matching up with the need of young people today. And here's a quote I mentioned to y'all, that the state auditor audited this grant, and what they found, what they stated here is that the juvenile justice coordinating councils for the counties we reviewed generally did not update their county's comprehensive plans. And when they did, the counties made only limited revisions that failed to demonstrate how their strategies for addressing juvenile crime and delinquency had changed over the last 20 years. So again, 1 in 2 counties today are spending 70% or more of their 2022 JJCPA funds on probation salaries and benefits. And that's 90% for small counties. And we often hear, again, like, we want to work with county agencies, and probation is a county agency. And I would like to say that we're aligned, right, in making sure that youth are invested in. So when we talk about reinvesting JJCPA funds, this is not a defund kind of argument. This is a reinvest. We know that JJCPA is just a drop in the bucket for the overall amount that county probation departments receive. For example, in Santa Barbara, we did this analysis specifically to that county. And in there, JJCPA funding is 0.06% of probation's overall county budget. So moving JJCPA dollars is like nothing to probation departments, but it means everything for us. Community-based organizations, y'all know how we can stretch a dollar and how far 100,000 can go, $500,000 can go for our organizations. And so now what does it look like in Orange County, right? So in Orange County today, the juvenile justice landscape from 2020 to 2022 versus 1990 to 1994, there's been a 94% drop in total youth referrals to Orange County juvenile probation. That's huge, y'all. 94% drop. Today in 2022, the total number of referrals to Orange County juvenile probation was 0.6%. It's not even 1%, 0.6%. In comparison, in 2000, youth referrals, I'm sorry, not Monterey, should say Orange County. I have an analysis on Monterey if anyone would like to see it though. And in Monterey, 2000 was 7.5%. Okay, in 2022, it's 0.06%. So we believe that the dollar should follow. This means, it must mean, young people are in the community, right? So how has county investment reflected the changes that we're seeing at the juvenile justice, within the landscape of juvenile justice? For JJCPA, just JJCPA, focusing on Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act, 87.5% of JJCPA funds in 2022 went towards Orange County probation salaries and benefits, whereas 2.5% went towards community-based organizations. So if we look, as Alejandra was mentioning, the way we got this data was by looking at the expenditure reports that the county sent to the BSCC. So this is all based off of their numbers and the analysis that they put forward. So about 700,000 funds went to the juvenile recovery courts, and the parent empowerment program, which was the only CBO that was listed for the juvenile recovery court, had access to about $4,000 of that 700,000. And if y'all know about these, this is your county, so if there are specifics that you're saying, like, I know JRC and you want to add on, please let me know. I only know what's going on based off of talking to y'all and having access to those documents. So please feel free to interrupt or add on to the conversation. And then about 370,000 went to the decentralized intake shares prevention program. And it's not clear whether CBOs had access to this fund, but there's a stated collaboration between community partners, which were the Pepperdine Resource, Youth Diversion Education, PRIDE. But it didn't say whether there was a dollar amount that went to those CBOs or those community partners. And then about 650,000 went to the truancy response program. And half of that, so around 300,000, went to salaries and benefits of probation. And it's not clear that there was a collaboration with the CBO in a dollar amount, but they said that they worked with the OC Department of Education, HCA, Waymakers, Boys and Girls Club of Garden Grove, and then local school districts. And then about 1.5 million of funds went to a school mobile assessment and response team. And then about 1.3 of JJCPA funds went to Smart North. And what SMART does is respond to calls from school and community reports of violence and threats. And each call is serviced by an assessment of a situation, including home searches for weapons and referrals to law enforcement, diversion programs, or all other alternate services. And they work with the Orange County Municipal Police Department. The Youth Reporting Center received about 3.4 million. 2.3 million went to probation salaries, about 52,000 went to CBOs. So probation officers refer youth in violation of probation to the Youth Reporting Center in lieu of filing formal violation. And there they receive full academic program, group counseling, individual counseling, random drug testing, and then on-site job coaches and vocational training. And then the last budget item in 2022 was $50K of JJCPA funds to Active Recidivism Reduction Initiative via engagement, where youth participated in biweekly meetings with other youth mentors, individual mental health care worker, and then probation for progress checks. So before I move on to LA County, I'm not sure if anyone wants to add to this conversation. I want to make clear that JJCPA funds are, again, intended for prevention and intervention. They are not earmarked for any specific agency. These are just dollars that are meant to provide services to young people. That can include Office of Education, Parks and Recreation, mental health departments, behavioral health, every CBO on this call, and so forth. Did anyone else want to jump in?
I just wanted.
I was like, Natalie and I both unmuted. Go ahead, Natalie.
Megan and I, we've always been trying to share to the group about how important it is for us to show up at these meetings. And I think you did an excellent job of just kind of bullet pointing and doing like kind of the work that we would love to be able to do and to be able to kind of highlight it at a higher levels to be easily digested. So I would just want to thank you, Nancy, for that, because that's exactly what I had hoped to have a conversation like this with us, with us CBOs. And I know we have partners who are trying to advocate and empower to speak up more and to share and have this space to be a safe space. And it's not to point fingers, but it's just because all of us are here to help and how do we reinvest? And I really love and appreciate that your emphasis on that is that we're here to reinvest the work because things have changed. The trend has changed. So therefore the money needs to follow and match that. And that's how we need to reinvent ourselves and see things differently. And I thank you for emphasizing that and knowing that all of our partners here want, and we're all here to share in this, but also how do we help and support and move this forward with, especially, this is more informal for us providers, but for myself and obviously Megan, who we do sit on the council, to how do we empower ourselves to help move this, right, and guide this forward in the policies under JJCC as well. So thank you for that. I'll pause.
Yeah, and I wanted to highlight, I feel like, Nancy, we need to have a sidebar meeting with you as well on this. I just want to highlight too to everybody that may not kind of understand where this comes from and why Nasli and I do push for the community-based organizations to be present at these meetings or to have a voice, is because a lot of these programs have been funded for a long time, with the exception like the SMART program, which is probably the newest program, but I think that's still about 3.5 going on 4 years old, and then is now expanded. With the exception of truancy court, because the law had changed, so now it doesn't go through kind of the county, but it's for CBOs, even though that's a different day, and I know Christina's on this call as well. But a chunk of that does go to the Boys and Girls Club, so that's probably the one exception in this whole list. When I first came on JJCC, gosh, I think going on 4 years ago now, one of my big questions for all the projects that were being funded was like, okay, the legislation says CBOs have to be involved. Who are your CBOs? Yeah. There was a big misunderstanding, one, of what CBOs were, and then two, of their involvement. So since then, we have seen more of the agencies at least identify who their partners are. So the next stage of this, which Nasli's been a big part of, myself pushing for it, and then now we're starting to get other people on board as well, is how then do we shift and make this a more fair and equitable process for people to be able to apply? Because as it is now, people, if you guys are looking at this, I can guarantee probably 100% of you, with the exception of Nazli or Christina, because she's in it, go, I don't even know what this funding is. Can we apply to that? Who's it open to, right? Like this is just, it's just not something that's open. So we've been pushing for a fair and equitable process to be able to apply for these fundings. So this has been going on for a couple of years. And finally, last year, we had some movement on this. And so now we have come to a process where we've now created like an application, a process, and we are now getting to the point where we're currently asking for outcomes for these programs. Because the other thing was we just keep funding them and we didn't know, are they doing what they're saying they're doing? What are the outcomes? Is this actually hitting target populations or areas of need within the community? And so we're in the very first stage of that, but these agencies have now reported out their outcomes. And what we're going to start doing as a body is kind of having them continue to do that. So that way we can kind of hold their, their feet to the fire or provide support, right, if it's needed, to make sure that they are being successful. So in this coming year, part of what Nazli and I are going to be doing in this group as well is, as that process now becomes public for the application and the funding, we will be putting that out to partners. I do want to be very clear, though, this isn't just like a pot of untapped money at this point. All of this money is already designated to these projects. So we don't have like all this like extra funding out there. However, as we're going forward, if these projects aren't up to par, or not meeting needs, or whatever else it is, that's where it kind of opens up our opportunity to potentially fund other projects that are in the community. So as those things develop and come out, obviously we'll be keeping you guys posted on that. But this is the other reason why it's very important to come and have your voice heard. And Nancy, I was very interested when you said it's intended for intervention and like prevention sort of stuff, because I know in ours, and I think we pulled out of the legislation as well, that it is also for kind of the suppression side as well. So unfortunately, like a lot of our projects kind of fall under that side as well. And so that's something I would be interested in hearing about, or seeing how we can kind of shift that narrative at the council level too. So we can probably sidebar on that later, but hopefully to give some people some context of where we're at or what all this means and why Nazli and I are always saying, go to meetings, show up. And you guys are like, I don't know what it is. Here's what it is essentially. So.
That's great. I think that when I heard that y'all were going to create a more accessible process, like, okay, there's this money. How do I get access to that money? Having that just something bare minimum, a website that says apply here, or this grant cycle is open, because a lot of the times we just don't even know, right? Like we don't, and sometimes that it feels intentional, whether it may not be in Orange County. I hear y'all have an amazing chief, but in other counties, community has been really locked out of the JJCPA process. And I was just gonna, go ahead.
No, and I was just gonna say, it's also, the policy isn't written well. It doesn't have any teeth. So when you're given money and you're only accounted to do so much, you're only going to do so much. So it has to start at the JJCP funding level, that they're not even asking for probation for anything more than this little report that you just got right here. That's why you don't have defined details, because the report that they have to submit is very general. So if they're not holding the probation accountable, then the probation isn't being pushed, right? Well, you don't have anybody lighting the fire to say, hey, and nobody's questioning it, then yeah, you're going to continue funding the same thing over and over again. And I think that's the change that we've been seeing probably with the past 6 years. So it all is a trickle effect. And so we need to follow policy in the way that it's written. So that's why I'm very interested about the policies that you're trying to change to create some more teeth, so that we are held more accountable to the funding that's being given.
Yes, and I saw a question in the chat. Okay, Megan, yeah, did you want to respond?
Oh, I was muted again. Yes. Yeah, so I just typed it, but Veronica, to answer your question, a great question. Like technically anyone who, applies can receive funding. That said, there historically hasn't been like an application process at all. And so it's been more kind of projects that have been grandfathered in for quite some time, long before I've been here, and or projects that were created by the agencies who were involved. So like I said, the newest program is the SMART program, and that's actually led by the Sheriff's Department. So the Sheriff's Department is part of this process. So they had put in, you know, an application for, I think it was in collaboration with the district attorney at the time. And so had put that in. So it's not something that's necessarily like publicly known. And so that's why we were pushing to have like a fair and equitable application process. So that way, at least people are aware of it and putting it out there. So at some point this year, early in the year, the application will get starting to get posted on the site, which I believe is going to be the JJCC site. So that way it's open. So projects can apply at any time. There is a funding cycle. It's all on the application as far as when we review them, when we vote on them, that sort of stuff. In fact, we're voting on them, I think, in a couple weeks for the new ones coming up. And then who decides that is JJCC. So I know we're throwing around a lot of acronyms here too, but JJCC is the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, which is the body that oversees the JJCPA funding, which Nancy's telling you guys about. And so that's the council that Nasli and myself sit on. We and Heather Benjamin from Waymakers are like the community-based representatives for our various headings. And then there's representatives from like probation, sheriffs, district attorney, law enforcement, that sort of stuff. So those meetings are all open to the public for anyone who wants to come. We also meet quarterly. We do have special meetings. Last year, we had a lot of special meetings because we were talking about this application process. But typically we meet quarterly, so we will meet in a couple weeks. So, and I believe they're still offered virtually, so you guys don't have to come in person if you're not on the council. So you guys can still just at least log in and check it out and listen and kind of start hearing what's going on. So hopefully that answered. That was a lot of info.
And maybe if folks have capacity, I know like Jessica in Riverside, they were able to add more community seats. They also created bylaws. So there's a lot of like county advocacy that can happen specific to Orange County. And if there are any open seats, I think Ronnie sat on the JJCC for a second. Ronnie, if you're still on the call, if you want to chat about that. But yes, this can be a community-led process, and I'm really glad to hear that that's kind of the direction y'all have been headed toward. Okay, so I'm gonna
Was
keep it.
that towards
Oh.
me, Nancy?
Yeah, I mean, just like if you want to talk about how you can get involved or what your experience
Well,
was like.
I actually never sat on the JJCC. I think I submitted like a application or something like that years ago, but never got accepted.
So to chime on that as far as applications and stuff, so those speaking of bylaws, we did rewrite and update the bylaws I think a year or two ago. Now I forget. And so there is now a cap on certain seats. The county seats, they do get grandfathered in. So when somebody leaves, they appoint somebody else to be in it. But the community-based seats, I believe we have a 3-year term, Nasli, or 2-year? I don't remember. 2. And so those come up. And again, when someone steps down or terms out or anything like that, there's an opportunity to apply. There has been since I joined, and I think way prior to that, there still is an open seat for the business seat. So if somebody from kind of like the like corporate public side, if anybody works in that side, is able to apply for that position. And I think we filled the education position. So pretty much everything is filled, I think, except for the business seat. So if anyone is interested, you're more than welcome to check those out. Or at least at the bare minimum, just attend the meetings, right? So that way you don't have to be on the council, but at least attend the meetings and be interested in that way. So, but if you guys need more information, feel free to let me or Nasli know, and we can help you as well.
And speaking of membership, in Los Angeles, they were found to be out of compliance with their minimum membership needed. So there was not community members on their JJCC. So in 2016, the Board of Supervisors added 10 community representatives, 5 CBO representatives, and 5 at-large community reps. So now LA's JJCC has 27 voting members. In results, they were finally able to update their county comprehensive plan that was completely untouched since 2001. So y'all saw those youth trends. If young people are no longer in the system, we need to change where the money is going, right? That just is like what makes sense. You have to reinvest that fund. So they saw in 2016, so that plan wasn't updated for 15 years. So they changed the plan, and as a result, those community reps updated the spending plan, and they reinvested millions of dollars from probation to CBOs that were providing youth development services through something called the Ready to Rise partnership. I can throw a link in the chat too about that. But basically those funds allow, the Ready to Rise program allowed for those funds to be distributed to the community that provides prevention services. So instead of like the funding going to probation contracts out, this went to Ready to Rise, which is specific to building relationships with community partners that work on youth development. And one of the first things that the JJCC members noticed when they were added to this council was that the money was being spent on really harmful probation programs, such as voluntary probation, which actually ended up putting more young people in contact with the system and then fewer. And the idea was that, you know, even before a young person was arrested or accused of anything, they'd be put into the probation database and put in contact with the system in that way, which is contrary to what JJCPA is all about, which is prevention and intervention. So the other issue with the program is that they had no results, right? So there was no evaluations, nothing that showed any progress or reduction in arrests going forward. It also disproportionately impacted Black and Brown youth, who are overrepresented in the population that was on voluntary probation. So here's an example. It was found, the community advocates found in LA that $400,000 was being spent on a youth diversion program that was a probation youth diversion program that serves 0 young people. So when we talk about no evaluations being done, like this is what we're talking about. Like this money has been grandfathered in, hasn't been changed. It keeps going to the same stakeholders without any program evaluations to prove that what they're doing is actually helping young people in the county. So here's just like, you know, with DJJ closing, the youth prison system in California closing, with young people going towards their county level, we know that each county probation department is receiving $225,000 per youth with DJJ's closure. So just doing this like cost analysis, this budget analysis, it's $41,000 to attend a UC, $17K to support a young person K through 12 education. And it just shows like, what are we investing in, right? Like a budget is a moral document. What we choose to invest in is what grows. So what we were trying to do as a statewide push, what we were trying to do with legislation is to change JJCPA, to reform it so that there's equitable decision-making. So these juvenile justice coordinating councils that Megan and Nasli were talking about, we were trying to change it so that 50% of the council is made up of community representatives, and that there be a community co-chair that helps decide how JJCCs spend JJCPA funding. And then we were also pushing for effective investment. So a certain percent of the funds have to go to prioritizing youth's most urgent needs. And that would be Office of Education, right? Parks and Rec, y'all, everybody on the call, mental health departments. So when it comes to equitable decision-making, 50% community representation with the co-chair. And what the state auditor found was that in a lot of counties, 20% of all counties, there was no JJCC entirely. So there was nobody sitting on these councils and deciding where the funding was going. And there have been several lawsuits across the county in Sacramento and in Fresno because community hasn't been involved in this process, and statutorily they have to be. It says it in law that there has to be community representation on these JJCCs to decide where the money goes. And then effective spending. We know that the bulk of the money is going to harmful programming, truancy programming, school-based officer programs. We know in Riverside County, there was the YAT lawsuit from a program that was funded through JJCPA funding that was causing really harmful voluntary probation programming and putting more young people in contact with the system. In comparison, CBOs receive a lot less money. And there are already like county and state programs that have adopted minimum percentages of like the grant going to CBOs. For example, Cal VIP funding. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Cal VIP funding, California Violence Intervention and Prevention funding requires cities set aside 50% of this money to CBOs. Prop 47 requires public agencies to subcontract grants to CBOs, at least 50% to CBOs. So what we're asking to do with JJCPA funding is not out of the ordinary. The state and county and city level have adopted these percent pass-throughs to CBOs specifically. And even if a county doesn't have a lot of CBOs, I know every county has a school. Every county has a behavioral health agency. Every county has a parks and rec agency, an arts agency. So there are other avenues to spend this money that can get into the hands of young people. This is just like an analysis of what each county is spending on probation salaries and benefits. We hear oftentimes like a small county, like how will they, if you try to say a certain percent has to go to non-law enforcement agencies, how will a small county survive when probation is really the only agency that provides resources? But we've been in contact with small rural counties like Inyo, and they use 60% of their JJCPA funds on recreational activities for young people, and then 40% on their Office of Education vocational training program. So 100% is going to non-law enforcement related programs in this small county of Inyo. And the last part, I know I'm talking so much, y'all. Please forgive me. This is just the last slide. San Francisco, I feel like I have to mention this because I'm out of San Francisco. But the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, DCYF, actually ended up taking JJCPA out of probation's agency, and they hold this grant now. So San Francisco's DCYF holds JJCPA funding. If in Orange County, y'all can think of another agency that is better structured to hold this grant funding, that's a possibility. In Los Angeles, they're trying to move this funding to the Department of Youth Development. And in San Francisco, they successfully moved it to the Department of Children, Youth, and their families. And what they did was create a survey to understand what are the needs of young people. Like, okay, we know youth are not in the system, so what are they struggling with? They found housing stability and homelessness to be a huge issue. Low-income families and youth, mental health concerns, right? This is a quote. I know a lot of people want to go to Kaiser, for example, for mental health services, but they're swamped. They're overloaded. There's a lot of teens. I'm a high school counselor, and there's a lot of teens that need access, and school resources are very limited until they try to go to Kaiser, and to no fault of their own, they just don't have all the support services that they need. So here are this is the investment. So since DCYF has held this grant, 86% of the funds are going towards CBOs, which is amazing, such as Huckleberry Advocacy Response Team, United Playas Violence Intervention, Occupational Therapy Training Program. They provide case management, therapeutic yoga programs, Urban Services YMCA, tailor-made. And then here's investment, like an analysis of Monterey County that I was telling you.
Victim offender.
And that's the end of the presentation. I have analysis for several counties, but these are all the organizations that are backing this push. And we've seen a lot of pushback from trying to change this at the state level. And so that's why I'm on this call today with y'all, because even as we face pushback at the state level, we can do so much within the county, right? Jessica is proof of that. They've done so much change within Riverside. Orange County, same thing. Y'all are pushing for more access to this funding. So yes, whatever we could do to organize at the county level will help us when we're trying to do this statewide reform. But please, I'm going to pass the mic back to y'all because I talked way too much. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this.